The Depth to Delve Deep by Rote. Chapter 6. In Scotland. To be sitting on board a train towards Glasgow via Edinburgh from London is something. Rote allows imagination to move his train of thought northwards through England, bypassing many points of interest along the way. The sway of history holds him, and now first hand in the land of loving lore finds him somewhat sore. The train travels far too fast past the ancient line of defence, still standing as a landmark bulwark between Scotland and England, Hadrian's Wall. Rote learns later the wall was built in the early part of the 2nd century by the Romans during Emperor Hadrian's rule. The Romans ruled the civilized world. Anything beyond the old Roman rampart is considered wild. It stretches across what is and still stands as the first formal split between the Scots and the English. The wall is built to keep the Picts from pouncing, and maybe even for posterity to prove how far the empire reaches. Upon learning this, Rote finds it hard to believe the Romans would stop halfway to the Highlands rather than an indefinite span. Had it not been for the Picts, who proved to be as proud as the Scots and Irish, the Romans would never have settled short of it all. The train stops for a brief moment. Rote relinquishes his retrospective requiem, then right as rain begins again when the train moves northwards along the North Sea. He knows it's known as the North Sea. Its mists and winds hound the eastern shores of England and Scotland, and many a fjord found in Scandinavia. Rote's lost in thought. He sees the sea as this train bypasses many shires beholden by buyers along the way. The train passes through the border town of Berwick-on-Tweed in Scotland, but belonging to England. Evermore after King Edward I, the Plantagenet, with tragic consequences, heals the strategic site to his might in a medieval massacre en masse. As Rote learns, Longshanks, as the Scots see him, forces fealty while the people putrefy. He hones all in homage to sign his Ragman roll, a real record of who's who in 1296. Rote can see why it's once southern Scotland's strongest seaport. The hung hamlet hovers over the North Sea like a proud steed above the river Tweed. Rote leaves those thoughts behind. He hears a fellow passenger say something. He seems a little on the mentally ill side, surmised by seeing him try to woo a woman. She is withholding any response in fear of further jabbering. The fellow throws out like a mating call. Stirling Castle is the best and most impressive in all the land. Where this wisp of information wells from matters not. Rote perceives it as a possible place to visit. After all, it's one of the many Scottish locations depicted in the movie Braveheart. His raison d'etre. Sometime later, the train pulls into Edinburgh, Scotland. It's situated on the eastern part of the Firth of Forth. The mouth of the River Forth is the firth that runs into the inlet of the North Sea. It's the first time he's ever heard of the word firth. He figures many Scottish words have Scandinavian roots. The train has a brief stop in Scotland's capital. Rote's immediately impressed, wowed by the medieval nature of the historic city and all its architecture. It's only seen briefly from a disadvantaged view, though. He leaves nonetheless with a lasting impression. The train trolls out, leaving the obscurity of the station behind, allowing another momentary glimpse of one of Europe's most medieval cities to come back to. Rote's on board the train, spotting scenes and sights straight through the heart of Scotland. Scotland is split by the River Forth in the east and the River Clyde in the west. Somewhere in the center is Stirling. The train travels into Glasgow. It's much larger than Edinburgh. Glasgow lacks all the old architecture and lure of Edinburgh. Rote will learn it has a few of its own medieval monuments, like St. Mungo's Cathedral. It's where Scotland sainted Columba, an Irish monk in the same league as St. Patrick. Meet St. Mungo, who enters Glasgow in Gaelic as his Glasgow, or dear place. Not so far from there, a dormant 500-year-old dwelling rests, titled Provan's Lordship. Rote learns it stands as the oldest remaining house, while St. Mungo's Cathedral rests as the oldest building in Glasgow. He's sold on the idea to see the sights, but not today. He just wants to get to the inn, with wishes for work just north of Glasgow. On the bonny, bonny banks o' Loch Lomond. He will go singing the song, sung with the chorus strung. He will hear this chime in time when a band comes by the bar in the inn he's on the way to. Sing it. Oh, ye'll take the high road, and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye. Me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. It's a lovely little song, and when he hears it for the first time sung, the singer comes by the bar to talk to Rote. She tells him of Scotland's islands and highlands. She fills him in all of the lore of the land and the lure of the lochs like Loch Lomond. Rote learns a lake is a loch in Scotland. He's on his way to one just north of Glasgow, like the Cockle of the North. And like the loch he's headed to, all lochs are filled with many lures and lore, like the largest Loch Ness. Its moniker monster, Nessie, is named after Nessa, a Pict princess. He will put lure and lore aside for now. Before departing England, Rote by telephone contacts one of the owners of the family-run Scottish inn back at the bed and breakfast in London. On the telephone, they give him directions on how to get to their inn off the beaten track along the West Highland Way. He guesses the trail starts somewhere around Glasgow. It bypasses their inn in Balmaha, and then travels through the Highlands of Scotland to Fort William. With directions in mind and out of the train station, a moving bus is stopped in a determined and destined way. Rote asks the driver, "Where's the Buchanan bus station?" The driver with a heavy Scottish brogue says, "I'm going in that direction. Hop on for free. It's short right up the hill, then down around the corner alongside Buchanan Street to the main Glasgow bus station." Rote arrives at the bus station on Killermount Street, foreign to all. He knows the name only the whereabouts of the haunted hamlet. It's halfway to where he's headed. He asks every bus driver and person who seems to work at the station, "Where's the bus to Drymen?" His denunciation of Drymen, forged from a foreign inflection on the English language, leaves all in earshot with a look. He can see them thinking, "What the hell are you trying to say?" Rote pronounces the small town of Drymen like two words, Drymen, and mixed with his accent, the Scots are left lost for any ability to assist. The Scots say Drymen like Drymen. So after many looks likened to a fish out of water, the lad finally finds the stance. He's baffled by yet another word to be learned, lest he be left lost, as usual, learning in the act of discernment. Stance means bus stop or stand. Now with appropriate stance, he waits to board the bus, and in time is on his way towards Drymen. The bus barrels along the wrong side of the road into the rim of rural reality and realty. Rote registers every sight seen along a seemingly short ride through Scotland's scenic suburbia. Once there and off the bus in Drymen, his mind is cast in the past, where droves of cattle and calves driven from dour distances work their way to a distant Drymen, a market town for trade. Rote walks into a pub with a taxi sign posted outside. He knows from his phone call back in London to his hopeful employer, the distance between the inn shored on the bonny banks of Loch Lomond and Drymen will cost no more than £5, or £5 as he hears it called. Quid will be added to his pocket dictionary. He understands its use like a buck to a dollar. In his mind, he listens and rings a rhyme. A quid is a pound, and with every new sound, learning is to be found. The taxi pulls up to the front of the pub. Rote opens the door on the driver's side, thinking it's the passenger door. He amuses the smiling taxi driver. This he'll do often, believing in his mind it must be so with every person born and raised in an environment operationally opposite to the one accustomed to. Happily, he now finds himself in another country with contrary driving customs to his own, though to be suddenly immersed in a diametrically designed different norm sometimes leaves them reeling, but otherwise feeling fine. The driving of their vehicles does make for some getting used to, both in direction and side of the road driven, not to mention the position of the steering wheel placed on the opposite side of a known norm. It's a culture shock. Scotland and England are amuck in European makes and models, all economically designed for fuel, not like the gas guzzling makes North America, they call gas petrol. The cab driver is amused by Rote's facial expressions every time a word or a way a word is said strikes it. He's a young fellow who worked at the inn Rote's on the way to. He knows the people who own and operate it. He's friends with one of the sons of the family run in. Once there, Rote gives him the £3 to cover both the taxi ride and tip. Trip over, Rote thanks the taxi driver and realizes he's now on the bonny banks of Loch Lomond. The loch in view, he sees the inn wells with workmanship. Shale stones stacked like bricks taken from a local quarry are bluish grey in hue. They make the outside luminous. Many numerous niceties enhance an authentic, rustic look anywhere looked, like wood trusses taken from older dilapidated or burned down buildings in the area's ancient past. There's an old oak tree where the inn gets its name. The tree is touted as the oldest in those parts, pushing 500 years plus. It's near and dear to the inn, on the bonny banks of Loch Lomond. Aye, another word he hears almost as much as the word hey in his own country. It will be the first word he will learn to say on a regular basis. Aye, a beautiful beginning.